the unfortunate part about standards, Drew, and this has been the case forever, is standards are built on the back of tragedies. You try to anticipate a lot that can go on, but and you've heard me at our conference stuff. I'll use the example of the Triangle Shirtwaist fire in 1912. That's where NFPA 101 came from, because in that fire where they were building or they were sewing all these garments and stuff, they locked all of the doors in the building to keep people from stealing stuff out of the building. And so everything was locked. They have a major fire. They kill a number of people died by jumping to their death out of the windows because they couldn't get out of the building. And what came out of that was the Building Exits Code was its original name, and that became NFPA 101, ultimately the Life Safety Code.
This is episode 85 of the Fire Protection Podcast, powered by InspectPoint. Today, my guest is Jim Pauley, CEO of the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association. I've known Jim for quite a while now, and it's great to finally get him on the podcast. He was a huge get, and it was a pleasure to talk to him. He's super knowledgeable, been in fire protection, obviously, for most of his career. We got into kind of his background, but really focused on the campaign that NFPA is really pushing this summer and this fall with a code for every moment and reverse renovations, really pushing how the NFPA codes affect our everyday lives. And, there's a big push for this Pro Codes Act bill through Congress, the U.S. Congress, and trying to get the public to realize everything that codes do for our everyday lives. So it's really cool to see it in action. I actually got to see one of their ads live randomly, kind of made the hairs on my skin stand up because, we're near and dear to the fire protection community. So really good to have Jim on. We got into some other stuff as well. And hopefully you enjoy the podcast. Thanks for listening. How you doing, Jim?
I'm good, Drew. It's great to see you.
I know. I didn't run into you in Las Vegas in June. I ran into Andy, but you were a busy guy that week.
Yeah, that week is a busy week for me. I think they schedule every waking minute of me for me that week. But it's also one of my favorite weeks of the year too. It's a great conference.
Oh, it is. It's I tell anybody if they're in the area or if they have the opportunity to go it's not. It's all the sectors in fire life and safety all together at once.
And it's grown so much over the years that you can do a lot of networking and see a lot of things and learn a lot. I mean, 130 education sessions I think we did during that week. So it's a pretty incredible conference.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you guys also have on the floor all the informational sessions as well. So as you're walking through all the vendors and exhibits, you can go see
what we call the theater sessions that you can do. Vendors do some of those. We do some of those, but you try to, and we got great feedback from the exhibitors. They just said the floor traffic was great and people were really engaged. And that means you're having a good conference. So it was a good week.
Yeah. Excited for next year. So welcome to the Fire Protection Podcast. First time having you on. I've had some of your, some others from NFPA on over the years. So
yeah, it's great to be on. It's always great to see you too.
Yeah. So I guess people who don't know you, right? I'd love to just give a quick intro, your background in fire protection and, I guess what NFPA is about. Maybe some people don't know what NFPA is. I don't know.
Well, this is a great time to educate on both of those. Let me start with the NFPA piece first, because I think that's probably will lead into some other pieces. But we've been around since 1896. NFPA was actually founded by a group of insurers who were trying to figure out how to help solve the fire problem. Sprinklers were just coming into play at that time. I think in Boston, within a 50-mile radius, there were 9 different ways sprinklers were being installed. And the insurers were seeing various results from that. And they said, man, if we could get this standardized, we could probably get much better protection. And that's how NFPA was born. NFPA 13, the sprinkler standard, was our first standard we did in 1896. The National Electrical Code, which is our biggest document that we do. And I mean biggest from the standpoint of it's used everywhere. 1897 was when the NEC started. And so we moved along that path. It was really about fire prevention, fire protection. The insurers stayed involved for a really long time, but we went from those couple standards to 350 plus codes and standards that we do now that cover anything from a fire code, a building code, electrical code, all the way to fire department standards, gear, trucks, boots, helmets, staffing, all of those things that we do, and a range of standards in between. And we really became the fire prevention, I'll say, spokes group over all of these years, because that's really where we were focused. Along the way, governments figured out that, hey, we're trying to regulate safety. Let's not reinvent the wheel. It makes sense. We'll just use these standards that are created in the private sector. And so we see a lot of standards that are used in that way. But I always tell people, it's like, NFPA, what do you do? I said, so you remember stop, drop, and roll or crawl while under fire? They're like, yeah. I'm like, well, that's us. Sparky the fire dog from school. They're like, yeah, my kids did. I'm like, that's us. Sparky the fire dog. So, but for a large degree, NFPA's operated in the space you're familiar with, that people in the industry know who we are. A lot of the public don't. We'll probably get to that in a few moments. So just a great organization. It'll be 130 years old next year. How did I get here? Well, I have not been here the entire 130 years, although I think to some people sometimes feels like that. But I came out of the electrical industry. I was an electrician growing up. That I was in the trades. My dad was an electrician. That's the work I learned to do early on. Went to school, got an electrical engineering degree, started working for an electrical equipment manufacturer after that as an application engineer. Worked my way through there for almost 29 years in that industry. That I finished there as a senior vice president for external affairs and government relations for a big company, Schneider Electric, that many people will be familiar with. And I had a chance to do a lot of things, but one of the key things that the groups that I managed did was our codes and standards work. And so I was involved with NFPA since way back in the late 80s, early 90s. I always tell people I might be the CEO now, but I started out as a customer, a member, a technical committee member. I was on the Standards Council for NFPA. I chaired the Standards Council. So I just had a long history of involvement. And when they were searching for a new CEO, although I loved the company I was with and the people doing it, it was just an opportunity that I couldn't pass up back in 2014. I love the organization. I love the mission that we do. The other thing I'll mention, Drew, is probably important to the audience to know. People are often like, well, what is NFP? And look, we're a nonprofit. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. But we're a self-funded nonprofit, which means we don't get donations from people. We don't take government money and stuff to survive what we do. We generate revenue. So we have to function in that space. And there'll be some areas I suspect in this conversation where we'll talk about some of that too.
Well, that's a good point to bring up, because I actually didn't know that. I thought there's no grant funding or
any grants any grants that we do. Like we just did a grant for Department of Energy on electric vehicle firefighting tactics. But so you get grant money for that, but it's specific to that project. As a matter of fact, every one of those grants we get are matching grants, which means we have to put money into the grant along with the grant money to actually be able to do the grant. So I've said you never want to have an organization that lives by grants. You're at the whim of the government. And so we take a few of those projects where we think it can help in the marketplace, but it's a really, really small part of overall what we do.
Yeah, that's good to know. I never knew that. And it's going to transition to kind of some of the things I want to talk about and how you guys are doing that. Funny enough, literally 2 days ago, I I got the magazine. Oh, you
You
can't
got
see
the
it, but
NFPA journal, yeah.
yeah,
I got mine. I got
and
mine
we're going
too.
to talk about it. So,
And that's, and, you know, and that's, as you know, because you're close to all this, that's one of the many things that we do in trying to keep people informed and up to date. You know, but it's different than it was 130 years ago in the way,
yeah,
in the space and the way you have to operate. Whereas when we started, the insurers were primarily funding all that,
right.
you know, and that's not the case anymore. So really, you do have to. It's a self-funding model. I mean, we have about 300 employees
Yep.
at NFPA, so you got to generate revenue to be able to pay employees to get the work done, and so we, from that perspective, we kind of function like a business.
Yeah, and get the best of the best, right? Yeah, it's funny. So I got that a couple days ago, but then a week or so ago, I'm watching. I think I was telling you the other day, I was watching NBC Connecticut or whatever, and in pops a code for every moment ad, and you know, the hairs in my, you know, arms stood up, and I was just like, this is I don't know if they have me targeted, you know, or what, but it was I knew I was talking to you about it, but it was funny that I actually saw the ad.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it kind of goes back to what I said in our history. Well, I think we've really had operated in the background. And, you know, for 100 plus years, and it's been fine. You know, contractors knew, you know, stuff, standards, designers knew standards, things that you had to do. What's happened in more recent time is we can't sit in the background anymore. We did some surveys, some focus groups with some folks, and said, what do you know about codes and standards? And people were like, nothing. It's like the stuff just magically happens somewhere. It's like government does these, right? I mean, I assume our local council people are writing all these things. And we said, you know, the United States, especially, and other parts of the world as well, but particularly here, it's a private sector based codes and standards system. And that's what we operate in. People pretty universally agree government writing standards is a really bad idea. But what people don't realize is that government doesn't write standards. They're done by private sector organizations like us. And look, we're one of 300 or so private standards organizations in the U.S. Our standards don't carry any weight except that they are a voluntary consensus standard. And so designers use them as points of reference. Contractors use them. Local governments say, we want to use that standard for the electrical code because we don't want to write one ourselves. Great. Right. But now you see a lot of challenges to that system. Yeah. And you see a lot of people saying, well, let's just not use what's in the electrical code. We'll just write those rules out and do something else. And we've seen state legislators take out major parts of codes and standards because people have just said, well, we don't want to do those things. And so what you saw in A Code for Every Moment is part of a bigger campaign that we're doing to change the awareness about codes and standards and about the work that it is that we do. And for people like yourself that's in the industry, I think that commercial is even more meaningful because what people have told us is they just said, somebody's finally telling our story. And people feel good about that. And that's this thing that we've really tried to tackle is we just said we can't sit in the shadows anymore. It's not, in today's world, way too much communication channels, way too much information. We got to be really straightforward and clear about what we're talking about.
Well, it's funny how the ad is done. It's very well done because when I personally, and a lot of fire protection professionals I know, they walk into a building, you're looking up, you know, you're looking around, you're looking at different things, and it's funny that the ad kind of follows that and it shows it for, you know, the public of like, hey, all this stuff is happening behind the scenes that you don't know about.
That's right. And I'm sure you have heard of people, in your audience probably have too, but the NFPA Fire and Life Safety Ecosystem, those are those 8 cogs that we put together and said, this makes up a safety system of really key. And 2 of those cogs are, current codes and standards and reference standards that are within that. Mm-hmm. And that's really part of what this campaign is how do you work your way around that wheel at getting to the important points. So what you guys do, knowledge transfer, training, that you provide to people, that's one of those ecosystem cogs. Enforcement. Right. I realize a lot of people in the audience like, my local fire inspector, electrical inspector. The reality is those folks are really critical to the system. We want to make sure they're well trained and that they have great knowledge. And so this is the start. This campaign is the start of what we're talking about. It's not the end, but this is the beginning. And I feel proud that we were the ones that said we really gotta stick our chin out on this and lead down this path. And that they did a great job on the code for a moment. If folks haven't seen it, you can go to don'tchancesafety.org and see it on there as well. They did a great job.
Yeah, we'll toss it in the comments here, so you'll be able to click it if you're listening or watching this. Kind of comboed with that, you're doing something on the social side, right? With Jonathan and Scott. I saw that a few weeks ago as well.
We are. There's another great site that folks can check out, reverserenovations.com. Jonathan Scott, well-known home renovation TV personality, but it's a lighter but still serious take on the importance about codes and standards, and he does a great job at showing what would the world look like, potentially in your home if you didn't have codes and standards, and a little more humorous than the code for every moment thing. But as I said, no less serious. And what we really liked about working with him is he knows the space, and he's like, codes and standards are really important to this. They're really important because they help protect people. And so not only did it make a great spot, but his heart was really in it, as well, because it's an important topic.
Yeah, it was funny too. He made a light of the situation, but also had fun with it. And
we've gotten. It's funny. I was speaking at an audience a couple of weeks ago, and in my speech, I had both commercials, and I showed the code for every moment thing, and people were like, wow, this really drives home the point. I did the reverse renovation. So it was funny. They're all applauding, after that one, because people do like the humorous side of some of the stuff, and it's a very quick thing. It's all reverse renovations really designed for social. You won't see it on streaming TV or any of those things, but it's really designed for social aspects. But it's and he's put it on some of his channels, social channels as well, with a lot of followers. So the message is getting out there.
No, it's great. We're, my wife and I were in renovation mode of our house, and, the building code, and, we were at a meeting with the town last night, and there's another project going on where they're pushing it back to the fire marshal, and then the fire marshal's going to have to look up NFPA 13 and 101. And it literally happened like 12 hours ago. And there's a reason, for these standards, right? And not a lot of people see that. So,
well, the unfortunate part about standards, Drew, and this has just been the case forever, is standards are built on the back of tragedies. You try to anticipate a lot that can go on, but and you've heard me at our conference stuff. I use the example of the Triangle Shirtwaist fire in 1912. That's where NFPA 101 came from, because in that fire, where they were building, or they were sewing all these garments and stuff, they locked all of the doors in the building to keep people from stealing stuff out of the building. And so everything was locked. They have a major fire. They kill a number of people died by jumping to their death out of the windows because they couldn't get out of the building.
Right.
And what came out of that was the Building Exits Code was its original name, and that became NFPA 101, ultimately the Life Safety Code.
Right.
But it took tragedy to say we should be going, locked doors are not a great thing for people in the building. And there's just example after example after example of that throughout history.
Yeah.
And I get it. In your audience, I guarantee you there are people going, I hate these codes and standards because, I have to do X or Y, or it makes me do something. Look, they're never perfect, but I spent 25 years on doing codes and standards work all over the world, by the way, in NFPA's process and other processes. There's a lot of thought and expertise that go into these things. The people sitting around the table in that room are looking to do the right thing. Right. And I often thought, I don't know why you would have to write. Nobody is going to do this thing. Why do you need something in codes and standards that says don't do this? Well, you know what I learned by being on a technical committee? There are people that actually do those things.
Oh, yeah.
And you go, now you got to write a rule that says, yeah, don't do that because it's a really bad idea for all these reasons. So I just implore in the audience for people that are like, I don't like codes and standards because I have to do certain things. Just recognize they're not written by NFPA staff on a hill in Quincy, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
They're written by people that are experts from contractors, from designers, from users, from industry, from manufacturers, from insurers, all bringing a collective knowledge base. And the system works. I can tell you all over the world, it's by far the best standard system that I have seen operate in the world.
Yeah, it does. And I experienced it. And, I'm on 2 technical committees now, and it's just a diverse knowledge out there. And, I'm younger compared to a lot of the technical committee, but they're bringing me on for fresh new ideas, I think, at least the one I'm on with remote inspection. So, it's a diverse, it's all over the world. Right. And a lot of different people coming from different facets. So,
and they take their role seriously. They're not looking to make contractors' lives more difficult or any of those things, but there are things that you learn that it's like, boy, that was a tough lesson to learn. We should make sure somebody else doesn't make that same mistake. And that's how standards get written. And very balanced process. Nobody's dominating. And I hear people all the time say, well, the manufacturers determine what goes in NFPA standards. No, they don't. They're a small piece of the committee. I always give the 1/3. Nobody can have more than 1/3 of the membership. No classification. And it takes 2/3 to change anything. So I got to make a case for you, in those other categories that this is a good idea. So I better have my facts and my data together.
Yeah. And if you see a problem and want to voice that's the whole public comment, right? That all has to be addressed.
I mean, the NEC that was where I was primarily involved. It wasn't unusual to have 3,000 to 5,000, what we now call public inputs. In those old days, they were called proposals, and 3,000 to 5,000 public comments every cycle.
Wow.
Because people are like, we need to fix this. This new technology is coming. What do we now do about, EV charging and these sort of circumstances? And what do we do about these lithium ion battery kings and energy storage and standards? What people ask all the time, why are NFPA standards popular elsewhere in the world? And I have determined in sort of my own research, having been able to travel to all parts of the world.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why they are is because they're up to date.
Right.
No, we update our standards every 3 to 5 years. Some people would say that's too often. Others would say that's not often enough.
Right.
But 3 to 5 years, you go around the globe and people are like, we're using standards that are 15, 20, 25 years old.
Sure.
In parts of the world. And so that is a big deal about trying to keep up with technology and keep up with the changes.
Yeah, I think the cycle's good, the 3, 4 to 5, right? Where I do see where I do see a gap or, a hindrance, whatever, is the adoption of those codes, right? Where then it extends it out another 5 to 8 years, right? Until jurisdictions adopt them. Now, some jurisdictions are, hey, latest and greatest, which is amazing, but unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. At least in, the system, fire protection system world, at least. So,
and I think that's where a lot more, what I have seen over the latter years of my career is politics has begun to play a lot more at that state and local level than what it was before. Right. I think that, when you have state building code committees that have the fire marshal and one fire protection person on it, and the rest of the committee is made up of builders and developers.
Right.
It's hard to advance them. We had states like North Carolina. North Carolina said, we're not going to change any codes for 10 years.
Wow.
10 years. That's a huge mistake. Yeah. Huge mistake. The amount of technology that changes in that time period, but they're like, no, we're not going to change our codes for 10 years. It states New Jersey, the interaction between, I do plan review. I have to get my plans approved and all those sort of things. The designer got to go through that rigorous process. Nope. New Jersey changed it to say designers now can just state that they meet all of the state requirements on their plans and permits without any
review. Wow.
And you know who did that 20 years ago? In the UK, they did it, and that's what led to Grenfell.
Interesting.
I love the guy we had speaking at CNE. He was a professor who was involved in Grenfell, and he said, we knew very quickly what happened at Grenfell, but it took us 7 years to figure out why it happened. And he said the why it happened started decades before of nibbling away at this system, taking the enforcement piece out, removing, oversight out of the system. And we end up in this tragedy. So now they're back trying to figure out, how do I get back to a system that has the right oversight? And unfortunately, I see in the U.S. the same sort of trends, that are going on. I think it's one of the most serious challenges for the entire industry. Yeah. And it doesn't show up overnight. It nibbles away at it for years, and then you end up at a point where you go, what happened?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not just fire either. It's probably all building, right?
It is. I think it's across all disciplines that, that you could imagine. I mean, there were days before, and you could argue about, the amount of power they had. But when the fire marshal said at a jurisdiction, we need to use this fire code, adopt this, whatever, people were like, well, that's what the fire marshal's saying. So, this is really important. That's what we're going to do. Now the fire marshal's like just one small voice in this. And that's unfortunate because they're the ones who end up in the middle of the tragedies when they happen.
Yeah. They're the ones responsible. They're the ones getting, the reporters in front of them asking them why. And a lot of times it's not their, not their fault. Most of the time it probably isn't. So, I know the age. Yeah.
Well, and so go back to your point that a code for every moment.
Yeah.
Just trying to start to change the mentality of people to understand where these things come from. That's what this is about.
That's great. So I guess what is the big, obviously you want to educate, right? And prevent this from happening, but is there, I know there's a congressional bill up for discussion, I guess. I don't even know what phase it's in. It's the Pro Codes Act, but
so there's a second two things sort of happening at the same time, is the way I would describe it. One of those has been what we've been talking about is we have heard from people in the industry and fire marshals and others saying we need better tools to help explain where codes and standards come from. So that's the one thing that I've been talking about. How do we make the invisible more visible to folks?
Right.
The other part of this is a number of years ago, and NFPA's been involved in a bunch of these. This idea of suddenly started happening, right? Government's been using private sector codes and standards for decades upon decades upon decades.
Yep.
And it saved them time, it saved them money. It created standardization because often the same code that was in Washington State was the one that's in Florida. Yeah. So contractors, installers, manufacturers all kind of knew what they needed to do. So you had standardization. Suddenly, in the last decade or so, what you've had is people saying, oh, by the way, since government's using those, they should all be free.
Right.
Now, I realize when I say that, there are people in your audience going, yes, we agree with free. We like free things. I just want to put it in perspective of what I said earlier. Yeah. We're a self-funded nonprofit. How do we generate our revenue? Through the sale of our codes and standards.
Right. People
like you guys, your customers, they buy a copy of NFPA 25 or 13 or 101, whatever it is.
Yep.
That revenue is what we use to be able to do the next set of updates to the codes and standards, to be able to put the committees together, to be able to manage the process, to be able to do the fire prevention messaging. So our ability to sell our codes and standards is really important. Well, this idea of, they should be free, people are just like, we're just going to take NFPA stuff and make it available to everybody for free. Well, although that can sound like a great idea to your ears, we won't be around to do the next update that you need, because if we can't generate revenue, I can't pay folks to work, and we're not going to exist. So this has all been in the courts, and the courts have been, a bit all over the map about this idea of if it's what we call incorporation by reference, when a government decides to use it and they reference the standard. Mm-hmm. So what the Pro Codes Act, it's all over the place. And we're like, Congress needs to reinforce what they said. Back a long time ago, Congress did a thing called the National Technology Transfer Act, where they encouraged the federal government and the agencies in the government to use private sector standards versus attempting to write their own. They said it's more efficient, it's more effective, the standards are out there. Congress was very much on board with that. Now we're having to go back and tell Congress, you need to reinforce what you said. So there is a bill called the Pro Codes Act. It says two things in that bill. It's unlike the 6,000 page bills you hear about on the news. Yeah. This thing is a page or a page and a half. And what it says is, hey, just because a standard gets incorporated by reference doesn't mean that the copyright holder loses their copyright. Sure. And that's very important to us, because that intellectual property that we own is how we survive. Yeah. So it says that. And then it also says, and where those standards are incorporated by reference, the standards developer, me, needs to make that standard publicly accessible and publicly available. And now for NFPA, we've been doing that for 20 years. In case your audience doesn't know, you can get to, on NFPA's website, you can go to any one of the code. There's a button that says View Free Access, and you can go read that standard from cover to cover online for free. Yep. You can't download it, you can't print it, or any of those things, but you can read it. And what's important about that is that when governments are using, people should be able to at least read what's in there. For professionals, they're like, I need a copy of the book, or I need a subscription with NFPA link that you can see on my shirt. That's our subscription. That's searchable, and they can arrange stuff, and they can send snippets off to people and do all the things that they can do. But for the non-professionals, although we have professionals that use free access every day too, but for the non-professionals, you can read all of our standards online. And so the Pro Codes Act codifies that inside of this particular legislation. It says, one, you don't lose your copyright just because it's IBR'd. Right. And secondly, which, by the way, Congress has said that before. We just need them to reinforce it again,
Right.
in more modern day terms. And second, you got to make those things publicly available. So one of the other parts of the campaign, if people go, to the links that you mentioned, you'll put in the comments,
Sure.
you'll see a button down there that says take action. And this is really important. If you click on that, it will take you to a place where there are messages already there. You put in your zip code and address, and it finds your senators and your state representative or your congressional representative that covers where you live. And you can hit a button, and it will send a message off to them saying, hey, we're looking for co-sponsors on this Pro Codes Act bill in the House. And so it takes you 2 minutes to do. Please, for your audience, if you live in the United States, go to that tool, take the 2 minutes to click the button, because if we can't protect copyright, and there are people out there that really want to say we shouldn't protect copyright, if that's true, we will not exist to be able to help push safety forward into the future. It's just it's a plain and simple fact.
Yeah. We need the NFPA and other organizations like you to kind of push things forward. Who would be against it?
Well, you have sort of what I call the free information crowd. That's like, look, everything should be on the internet and everything should be available for free. And nobody, there are people that believe there shouldn't be copyrights on anything that exists. And that's an unfortunate view, because you really, in the standards world, you have two options. Okay. Because it costs money to develop codes and standards. I mean, these are not inexpensive, to do, because you not only have to get the committee together and you have to do the work, you got to defend the process. So when people are upset, how do you handle those things? Appeals, legal cases, all these things that we have to do that people don't think about behind the scenes. So you only have two alternatives. One, people have said, well, just have industry do it. They're the ones with the deep pockets. All those manufacturers have all the money. They're not wrong.
Right.
Most people would say, I don't think we want the manufacturers writing the standards themselves.
No.
That we want them in the process, by the way.
Sure.
They have a voice. They're important.
Yep.
But they can't be the only voice or the dominant voice, right, in the process. Yeah. Or the second thing is have government do it. And, government's really gotten a great deal over all these years. It hasn't cost them anything. They haven't spent taxpayer dollars in doing it.
Right.
So suddenly you need what? You want to create a Bureau of Standards? We do 300. We do 350 standards. By the time you got through the whole construction industry, there are thousands of standards involved.
Sure.
You're really going to have a government body write those? No. And even in Congress, by the way, Democrat, Republican alike, they pretty uniformly agree having government do this is a really bad idea.
Yeah.
Right. So those are the two alternatives. Everybody's like, well, I don't like either one of those. Well, then the answer is independent, private sector-based standards organizations. And that's what we are. It's why we're very careful. And, you don't see us catering with any one group that's out there. I always say in the standards world, you probably know this, Drew, from being on a committee. If everybody on the standards committee goes away a little bit mad, you probably did a pretty good job at the standards process.
There's always one or two bonus to pick,
right?
At the end
There's
of those
always
meetings.
that thing but that's the dialogue. That's what's important about this process that we run. So Pro Codes is really trying to keep it. It doesn't give anything new. It reinforces the system that we really have today to make sure it can exist in the future. And please, I'd encourage folks to take 2 minutes. I swear, 2 minutes takes you long enough to type in your name and address, and it does all the work for you.
It's super fast. I've done it, and it's a couple clicks and you're off to the next thing. The one thing you did bring up about the crowd that thinks everything that should be free, right? We're coming into this age very fast of artificial intelligence, right? And there's these platforms out there ChatGPT, Gemini, Microsoft's version, there's a few others, right? Where that's kind of the Wild West, right? But and I've messed with it, right? I ask it a question and it's getting pretty close, but I'm always like, man, who's teaching this thing? And is it, I think there's some risk there. I like the idea, but who's regulating that? And is it, and you have some examples you brought me the other day.
Yeah, we had I'm now learning all this terminology, right? That these AI engines hallucinate is the term that they use, where they kind of make up their own sort of thing by connecting dots not to be connected. So I saw something posted on social media. We have a great standard called NFPA 70B. It's electrical equipment maintenance. It used to be a recommended practice, and the committee just changed it to a standard because maintenance of electrical equipment becoming so critical in the environment that we're in. And somebody posted and said, NFPA 70B is now required. And I don't know, they listed like 6 or 8 states where I'm like, I've never heard of anybody actually requiring 70B. So I sent it to our field folks and I said, hey, something going on that we don't know about. They go to all their state contacts. All their state contacts go, no, we haven't done anything with 70B. Well, we did through. What we found out was the guy that posted it likely went to an AI engine and said something like, where is 70B required? Well, the AI engine made an interpretation that because the NEC, the National Electrical Code, is in those jurisdictions, it has an informational note. If you know anything about our standards, informational notes are not enforceable. They don't, there's not a requirement. Their 70B was in an informational note. So the AI engine went, 70B is now required in all those states. So it made its own set of assumptions to be able to get to something that was 100% wrong. And so we are doing as NFPA work with AI and in the AI space right now. Our single biggest focus is making sure that the work we do is in a pure AI model that is trained by our stuff and by things that have been vetted by us and our technical folks before. As you and I both know, no AI model will ever be perfect. No. But we do know once you let it into the wild and AI models start training AI models on things that are not necessarily accurate, you snowball into this hallucinogenic effect that they're talking about to have happened. So we're keeping a close eye on it. I think AI can do some great things. What we do know, though, is AI is not a sprinkler fitter. AI is not an electrician. AI is not, the people in the trades are going to become the most important people in all of this because AI can't replace that work and decisions that they have to make on the job site today. And we want to make sure we're in a position to help enable that decisions to be made, not replace it. And that's a really important aspect for us.
Yeah, I don't think it'll enhance it incredibly because it'll be at the fingertips if they're using the right model, right, and the right agent, right? The public agents, there's some, it's life safety. I don't know if you should be using a public agent to make those decisions. So
I would agree with you 100% there.
And, whoever's feeding in the data into those public, it might not be, like you said, it might not be real or might not be factual. So, but it will enhance, those field teams or the office team or the salesperson that, might not be reading up on NFPA 72 on a yearly basis. Right.
But, and as you know, Drew, even in that AI space, even with a really good engine, codes and standards are very nuanced. Right? How they're arranged, the chapters, the way chapters interact with each other and all of these things, it's very nuanced. So if you don't ask the right things that are particular to your situation, you can get an answer that that you can say, well, that's a good code answer. It's just not a good code answer in the situation that I'm in. And this is the part for me. I don't think my brain's big enough yet to kind of grasp and understand all that, but it's a key thing that we're trying to keep an eye on, because we want what we're doing to be helpful, not not to be an unaided shortcut. Where people are like, well, I don't need to know anything about designing a sprinkler system anymore. I can just get AI to do it for me.
I know.
That's a pretty complex piece of things.
I have a feeling, though, in 10 years, it's going to be different. It is, and I've seen some of you're still definitely going to have to know that, but there is going to be a lot of reliance on AI, and there's a problem there. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it gets happening fast. So
I see our job as a independent safety, related organization, to try to help the best path in that forward, which may not necessarily be the shortest path.
Yep.
And that speed of things is always of most interest to people right now. And, I do think we have to be cautious. There were some examples of people saying, oh, we're going to use it in the fire departments and let AI make the decision when a call comes in about what equipment needs to be sent, to that particular fire. Well, what if AI gets it wrong?
Yeah.
I mean, nothing replaces the first due on scene that sizes the thing up and says, here's what we need. If AI says, I'm going to send one engine to this thing and it's wrong, where do you?
Oh, I know.
Where's the responsibility for that set? So we got to navigate our way. We got to navigate our way through this. I agree. It's not going to go away. It's not going to disappear. We've got to figure out the right way to navigate through it.
Yeah. It's I'm excited, and it's just, we got to, as an industry, be cognizant of what's happening, and it's happening fast. Yeah. Jim, this has been awesome. I'm really excited, obviously, to see just an ad on TV of NFPA. It's really cool, right? And then get to talk to you about it.
It was really cool for us. It was really cool for us too, to see our own employees who really felt like they were always behind the scenes. Now you see that on TV, and they're like, that's us. We're part of that. We're part of that. That's making that happen. There's a lot of pride in this industry, and there should be.
Yeah, there is. I've been in it pretty much my whole career, and very passionate. And I don't know another industry that's more passionate. So
I think that's probably true. And you know what, Drew, we can't lose that.
No.
In the safety world, if you lose the passion part of it, you're going to fail. You can have all the great technical stuff that you want, but you'll fail in the end, because you do have to express the passion about. We're talking about people's lives. We're talking about, property. It's really, really important. So don't lose that passion that you got. You're a key part of that.
I appreciate that. Well, I guess where can the audience find? I know we mentioned, I'll put some links in the chat or the comments, but what are the two, the Code for Every Moment and Reverse Renovations?
So you can actually get to both of them. And if you want to remember the short one, if you go to nfpa.org, you'll find the links on the front page.
Nice.
Of there. You can get to the sites specifically at don'tchancesafety.org.
Cool.
And Reverse Renovations, I think .org or .com, either one will get you to the Reverse Renovations piece. And again, if you're in this industry, take a look at those. We did the commercial, but it's not just about us. All those standards that you see, folks in your audience that make those happen in the field. So, everybody can feel a bit of pride about this.
Yeah, it was fun to see. It was definitely fun to see. Well, Jim, thanks again for popping on and talking. We could probably go another hour, but
I suspect we could. I always enjoy Drew. Thanks for what you're doing in carrying the messages out there. It's important.
Yeah. Thanks again.
All right. Have a good
All
one.
right,
See
take
you.
care. Yep. This has been episode 85 of the Fire Protection Podcast, powered by InspectPoint. I want to thank Jim Pauley for coming on from the NFPA again to discuss everything they've got going with these campaigns and the Pro Codes Act and what the transition into AI looks like here in the future. So thanks for listening again, and we'll see you soon.